then let's get this started. Hello, everyone. My name's Jacob. Welcome to the Man Talk podcast, number 10, with our guest, Ines. Ines, say hello to everyone, please.
Hi.
This is so cool. So we're on our 10th one. I want to give Ines a proper intro, so let's get this thing started. So Ines and I met back up in 2015 when she was doing her third year at UC Davis. She graduated in biochemical engineering in 2018, did 2 different internships during the summers, was absolutely involved with AIChE, and then she decided to turn it all around and go into a startup business after she graduated. Now, I have no idea what she was doing beforehand, so I'm going to go ask. Ines, explain your background, how you got to UC Davis.
So I actually went to a private high school, an all-girls private high school. And so their strong side was liberal arts. So everything from history and English and reading and literature. But it gave me a really good sense of confidence to kind of follow my passion for science. And in fact, it was really funny because I spent 4 years of high school doing video work. So all of my time was spent in the video lab, like making videos. And so everyone thought it was really funny that I went into engineering, but I really liked science. And looking back, I should have done more research about what it was that I was getting myself into, but I really liked chemistry. I really liked math. I really liked bio. So I was like, oh, like, chemical engineering, that sounds like a great idea. Like, it just sounds like it's the perfect fit. It turns out not exactly what I thought it was going to be, but I ended up loving it. Actually, the original plan was to go through the engineering curriculum as an kind of stage gate to go to pharmacy school. So I really wanted to go get my pharmaceutical doctorate in pharmaceutical chemistry from UCSF. That was the original plan, but I fell in love with biochemical engineering. Ended up doing a lot of internships in it, and I was in love. I was like, I don't need to go to grad school. This is what I want to do. And so it's been a crazy couple of years through my college and kind of post-college life. But I think one of the things that was really cool is I had a goal. I always had goals, but I allowed myself to interact with all the opportunities that I had along the way, and I think that's helped me get to where I am.
Wow. So all that came in from, I'm going to do a doctorate in pharmaceutical chemistry to, well, actually, this is good enough. And I could probably roll with this right now.
Yeah, I think 2 things kind of changed my viewpoint a little bit on my plans. One, I did not enjoy organic chemistry at all. That was not fun. And I was like, if I don't like organic chemistry, probably not a good idea to get a doctorate in it or anything related to that. I also figured out that I enjoyed the development side of the R&D more. So a lot of people clump R&D into one big, huge, like, department, basically. But what you really notice once you get into it, especially in industry, the research aspect and the development are kind of a cycle. And so they go hand in hand, but they are 2 different parts of the equation. And so you feed research into development, and then you get a feedback loop from development back into research. And so I liked the development part of it more than I liked the more academic science research. And so engineering was a lot more application and process and development based. And so I was like, this is a great fit for me. Like, it has enough science to keep me engaged, but it also has a direct application. And once I found kind of corporate R&D and what you can do inside the like world of industrial R&D, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I really like this.
So with that being said, what got you into like AIChE and the mentorship program and all of the things that surrounded it?
So my first 2 years, I told myself, like, I'm going to focus everything on school. And so I walked into Davis being like, okay, I'm going to do everything like engineering related. Like, I'm really going to dive into this. And the first year just didn't click. I just didn't feel, I think because we don't have a lot of engineering specific classes, like I felt like I didn't know anyone in anything. So the first 2 years, I didn't really do much. I was more in the dance scene. And then junior year hit, and I realized that people that I'd been seeing in my different classes all of a sudden were like in the engineering classes. I was like, oh, you're engineers with me. And then all my friends were in AIChE, and I was like, what am I missing out on here? Like, something's got to be worth it if everyone is going to this and I'm not. So I actually followed my friends to a lot of the meetings. And then it happened to be that a lot of my friends were on the leadership board at that point. Like, they had been involved since freshman year, so they had gotten exposed, they knew what they were doing, and they were very involved with AIChE. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, there's so many cool opportunities here. And so I kind of got dragged in by my friends, but I stayed because of all the opportunities that AIChE had to offer.
Well, good, because this is probably where you're going to get most of your opportunities from to begin with. I mean, that's how mine was with people like Matt and Rose and Steve and all of these great people. If it weren't for AIChE, I don't think I would have been able to really get the chance to meet them, or all the mentees that I got to be a part of their lives with. You, of course, being one of them, which was a big surprise. I was like, oh, wow, who's this fiery chick who's like really getting involved with all this stuff? She's really good at photography and like really skilled in her speech. I'm like, who is this gal? And then sure enough, it's like, yeah, Ines stuck around. It's like, there you are. Okay. Well, and it was a lot of fun having you around.
Thanks. No, that's great to hear. I think it was one of those scenarios where it really was kind of opportunity meets preparation. I went into AIChE and I was like, I am not going to be able to directly compete with all of my friends who have been in AIChE and know how things work, you know, on a direct level. And so I looked at, you know, what did I feel coming in from the outside? Like, I had a fresh perspective. I was coming in with 2 years under my belt at Davis, and this is the first time I'd heard of the club. And I was like, something, you know, this shouldn't be that way. Like, we should have more of a retention, and you should be able to keep more people. And so I walked in and I was like, we need some marketing around here. And so I was able to convince the boards that it was something worth investing in. And it can be hard because it's not like we have hard data that shows a, you know, certain amount of ROI or return on investment of the time and energy you put into marketing and branding. But I was able to convince people that some of the best brands are well known because of their brand image, not necessarily because of what they sell. And so I was like, if we do the same thing for AIChE, even just a little bit, we don't have to go to the same level that these brands do, but we brand it together, like we could have a much stronger AIChE, and more people would know about all the cool opportunities that AIChE provides. You know, you only get so much out of an email, and that's great for students who are already on the listservs, but you know, you can only get so many people to stick around for free burritos. Like, they'll come for free burritos, but will they really engage with all the opportunities? Not if there's no more free burritos. So I definitely think there was a very big like luck factor in that. There was a need that needed to be filled in AIChE, and at that time my skill set worked really well with that. And so that's kind of how I got involved and how I got kind of roped in. And so for me, it was great because it ended up being kind of the best of all my favorite things. It was a really fun thing for me to get to do. I got to do more marketing, more graphics, more videos, more photos. But at the same time, I was building a network inside of AIChE and really getting to know people who would help me like get through the engineering program, because that is really hard to do on your own. And so having the support system of all of my AIChE friends, the mentorship program, all of that, it was great. It was really, really great. So it was a beneficial kind of mutual relationship.
So with that being said, one of the ideas you got to implement was just marketing to the lower classmen, aside from the email chains and the more mainstream formal way to do it. You wanted some more informal ways to get involved in like the chemistry classes and the math classes. What other mentorship ideas did you start implementing once you got in your upperclassmen years?
So I think there was an interesting development of that kind of interaction between me and AIChE. So the mentorship program had been there, but it had been hit and miss, right? Some people had a really good experience with it, other people didn't. And so we were trying to play with different ideas. And I said, look, like if you're not selling this to the lower classmen or to the upperclassmen, because what was really interesting is we looked at the program holistically, and we were like, all the lower classmen want help, but not all the upperclassmen have the ability to help. So how do you structure this program for it to be mutually beneficial? Like the upperclassmen have to have something that gets them excited to be there. And so we tried the houses idea, like the 4 different houses, and I think they're still kind of finessing it. But I think what I ended up learning from this whole experience was that, it's not everyone realizes what it means to be a mentor. I think everyone wants to get menteed, and everyone kind of inherently wants the help to get to the next level. But once you're at the next level, there is not a lot of resources for you to turn around and be able to help someone else. And so I think we tried to build that in, and I think they're still developing a lot of that, and hopefully it's continuing. But I think a lot of the marketing that we put around it was to kind of keep in touch with those, 3rd and 4th year students that may not directly need any of the resources from AIChE anymore. They're taking advantage of them already by, going and networking with people who are from AIChE, or using their network within AIChE to get the interviews and the jobs. But at the same time, we need them to come back and help with the undergrads. So it was an interesting problem to kind of tackle. And I wasn't necessarily in charge of the mentorship program, but it was something that I got to kind of help and give feedback on. And I also brought a lot of experience from Danzantes del Alma, which was my dance group on campus, and how we did our Big Little system, which is very different than what we did at AIChE. We had kind of a much more social aspect to the Big Little program. It was really meant for you to start to meet people within it and kind of kickstart your networking, which within the dance troupe. But none of that was ever structured for career development, because Danzantes del Alma was not focused specifically on that. It was focused on academic retention, right? So we had a slightly different goal, but I felt like a lot of the lessons that I had learned from helping plan and organize that applied to AIChE's program, including kind of how we paired people up, what we looked for, things that we were interested in gauging. How do you ask people what they like and what they don't like? There's a lot of things that go into building this mentorship program, but I think it's gotten a lot stronger in the last couple of years.
Did you guys still end up using like Google surveys and speed dating, the idea of getting a lot of people in a room together and trying to see who they can figure out and vote as a mentor? Yeah,
so I think we did that the last year I was there. We started implementing a lot of these like more organic, giving you the opportunity to organically meet someone in kind of a non-organic format, which is really hard to do. But yeah, the speed dating was, I think, one of the bigger successes. We've definitely had other activities that we've been like, hey, like come meet people so that you can pick a mentor or a mentee for your kind of mentorship program. So there's a lot of activities. And what we encourage people to do too is still come to some of the activities. Say like, hey, like this is a great place to talk to and meet people that you could maybe make a mentorship family out of. But we didn't want to exclude people who didn't necessarily want to be in the mentorship program. So a lot of double duty programs like the pumpkin carving, which was one of the big ones, and I think they still do that, is they do a pumpkin carving right around this time, get a bunch of pumpkins, get a classroom, make a mess. Very fun activity.
So you use activities that are kind of not so much on the engineering side to just kind of bring people together socially, and then organically from that, they can start talking about some of the stuff they really wanted to, like, how do I get through my 3rd year classes or 2nd year? Or how do I figure out how to get into the internship and career fair without looking like a mess? Because a lot of people have a fear of rejection, and I think that's very human to have that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was very different between the 2 mentorship programs that I was involved in, AIChE, everyone is pretty much on the same, very similar career tracks, right? So you have the same classes. There's really only 2 majors there, chemical or biochemical engineering. And for the first 3 years, they're exactly the same classes. And so there's not a lot that you can use academically speaking to help put these people together. They're already in the same classes. They're already in the same academic spheres. So you need to kind of remove that section from the kind of mentorship experience, at least at the beginning, to help make connections organically and have people click. And then you can build the relationship. And on top of that, you ask for the academic help, because then everyone's been through the same classes and you know that. But in Danzantes, we were able to use your academics as a way to help funnel you. So for example, all of my littles and my grand littles, I think 80% of us are engineers. Not all chemical, but everyone is an engineer. So I had mechanical, biomedical, electrical, civil. So all of my littles were engineering. So my focus was on helping them navigate the engineering college and all of the kind of caveats that we had within the engineering college that a lot of other Danzantes students didn't deal with because they weren't engineers. At AIChE, everyone's an engineer. So you really got to give them that like social aspect to kind of click on, because everyone's on the same kind of academic track.
Yeah, so with that being said, it's a little harder to funnel people because you can't do it by major. And in the other mentorship program, it's like, okay, there's not too many engineers here. Whoop, instant funnel, instant way to categorize.
Yeah, it gave you a really good broad categorization, like methodology, right? So you could kind of help build, and you had something in common that wasn't necessarily like right off the bat. So there wasn't as much awkwardness. Here, if you tried to do that in AIChE, well, everyone's in the same major already. So that's kind of an understood commonality, but then you needed something else to help give them something to talk about and kind of get past that awkward, like, hi, I'm so-and-so, here's some small talk that we're forced to say. So it was a very interesting thing to tackle as a board member on AIChE, but it was a really fun experience to kind of get to be a part of from an organizational standpoint.
Do you think the board understood a lot of the problems in mentorship that were going on, like this communication issue that you're talking about, or how there's a lack of mentors, that kind of thing?
I think everyone in AIChE is very smart. We're all engineers. We all can see problems. But I think unlike your math problems or your chemistry problems that you deal with in homework, there's not a specific protocol for how to break this down into smaller problems, right? So a lot of my kind of input was like, hey, this is a problem that I've seen in DDA. This is how we tackled it. These were the results we saw. What can we take away from that? What do we think would work here? And it was a lot of back and forth, just kind of brainstorming, because I think everyone understood that there were some fundamental problems, but not everyone had outside experience to bring into to help find a different way to look at things. And since we're all chemical engineers, our brains are trained in very similar manners. So we're looking at this problem from one perspective all the time. It's going to be very hard to break it down. And so that's where I felt like having the outside experience from a different mentorship program was really, really beneficial, because everyone understood the problems were there and everyone was actively trying to solve them. It's just nothing was clicking. And I was like, okay, well, let's go out from left field. Let's try something completely different. And some of it stuck. Some of it didn't work. Not all of our ideas worked out very well, but I think the speed dating was one of the really good ones and people really enjoyed that. Another one was kind of the more general activities like game nights and board games and stuff like that. I think they're still working on getting more seniors involved and how to help market that. I think there's the fact that you need to have the ability to be a good mentor, you need to be able to be a good resource, and you have to have the time. And that's a really hard combination to find as a junior, senior in engineering, because you're kind of swamped with your junior level classes. Like it's just a reality. So I think we're still working a little bit on that. But from what I've seen online from their social media presence, it sounds like there's at least some kind of progress being made. So it looks great. And I think it'd be great to maybe, talk to some of the kids who are still in the program. And I know some of my friends from my generation still talk to their mentees. So that's pretty good. And so I think it's definitely making strides in the right direction. Not solved, not perfect yet, but definitely in the right direction.
I'm glad, because we were doing some of these tactics too in 2013, but we always have, every year they're going, we have mentors, but then there's also the mentors that we really need to do the work. And then that's like not even close to 50%. So then you get this like super weighted version where you've got all these mentors that are just doing, okay, I'm doing 1 to 2 people, maybe. And then you've got these super mentors that are just taking on like 20 people. And that Pareto distribution or that super unbalance seems to be constant. Like that happened to me. That happened to me in 2014, and I didn't mind it, and I thought it was helpful. I was surprised at how that model keeps showing up, as opposed to just going through and having, okay, I've got 10 mentors, and then we've got 40 mentees, and then 4 per. It doesn't always add up like that. And I know with the new exec board, I want to get on the horn with them and find out if they can use some of our old tactics. And one of them, being game boards and stuff, using like triple board Monopoly, doing something they've never done before. But also just organizing time for like resume workshops and simulations training.
Yeah, I think a lot of time we wanted that to be the case. We wanted it to be as evenly distributed as possible. I think one thing you'll find in engineering time and time again, and there's a reason the stereotype is there, it's this idea that not everyone is very social. Not everyone necessarily wants a social aspect. So you're always going to get a disproportionate amount of mentees to mentors, not just in the sheer numbers, right? You're not going to have a one-to-one, but you're also not going to organically get an equal distribution of people clicking with each other. So you're not naturally necessarily going to get one person to click with 4 perfectly every time. So it's a balancing act. Is how much do you want to force a specific distribution of mentee versus mentor versus how much do you want it to be organically? And my argument is always pro-organic because I feel like those bonds are stronger. And I think the mentees that are with mentors that click well, regardless of how many mentees that mentor has, you click well, I think your bond is still automatically stronger.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps.
Yeah, with pro mentors and being pro organic, I would say mostly organic with a little bit of force, just so that way it encourages people to step up to the plate. Because a lot of times, we've had mentorship programs prior to 2013 that were more, it's all up to you, and we're not going to do anything to encourage the cultivation of the mentorship program. So you're just going to take two mentees rather to one mentor, and you're going to do whatever, but it's all on you to do it. I found that was a very subpar method because you don't give any structure really to new mentors. I think that's...
Yeah, they don't have anything to lean on, yeah.
We should have what we do with the officer board, where we give them some level of, kind of a SOP. People like that. Okay, there is some level of written knowledge we learned from the past. So instead of having these mentors that are new that actually want to try, we can get them to get over these humps faster. And I don't think we've ever done that. But we keep doing it with like the senior representative or the AIChE president, but not the mentors. And I think that's kind of a disservice to them, because there's some people who they want to do it right, but they run into the mistakes of just someone who's never done it before.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of support out there to be a good mentor. And I think that's something we definitely struggled with at AIChE, and I definitely saw that as well in Danzantes. There's no hard and fast rule for being a good mentor. I think it takes a lot of people skills, and I think helping people who want to develop those people skills would be really helpful. And I think that would be definitely a really good next step, is to look at how do we make our mentors stronger? How do we support our mentors? And how do we help train our mentors so that they're the best mentors they can? And I think that's definitely something that could 100% be improved on. And I think the SOP is one way to do it. I don't know exactly what you would include in the SOP, because I think a lot of it, again, is people skills, and that's hard to quantify and like write down and like outline. But I think it'd be great to have some sort of like, hey, if you want to be good mentors, like here's some great tips. And like maybe even if it's a quick PowerPoint or just some slides that you share, or like a more general document, I think it would be helpful to have some guidelines, because most students don't innately know how to be a good mentor, even though they may want.
So I would agree. And I would say it wouldn't just be slides for them to have on their own to put in a file, but also be for something for someone in AIChE who is in the officer board or in the mentorship program who really has got some roots in it. So maybe take those Pareto distribution mentors and give them some wiggle room to make an organic SOP on some things they can fix right away. And that would be a good start, because then they're going over with a lot of these guys about how to fix a lot of the startup problems, so to speak, of the mentorship families.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is there does need to be a good amount of structure kind of outside to help these newer mentors come in and be successful, right? And I think that's where you're coming from a little bit, and I completely agree. And I think there's quite a few ways you can try it, and I really don't think you can hypothetically rule any of them out until you start. And I think one thing to take away from is every mentorship class is going to be slightly different. And I think that's the one thing that is really difficult for AIChE to sometimes grasp, is just what worked last year won't necessarily work again this, because your inputs are different, right? You have new people coming in, you have some people who have left. Like, at the end of the day, your entire system is different. So you have some similarities and you can make some base assumptions, but everything comes with a caveat that you've basically reset the system and you kind of have to start from scratch. So having a good set of, like, we've tried these and these are the outcomes we saw with these classes would, I think, be really helpful, both for the board and for the new mentors coming in, because I think everyone needs to realize every class of mentees is going to be slightly different. So what didn't work last time could still work this year, and what worked last year could not work this year. So there's a little bit of like that flexibility that needs to get built in, and getting very comfortable with the idea that not everything is super structured, which is a very interesting thing to see with AIChE. With Danzantes, nothing was ever structured. And so we were very comfortable with disorganization, a little too comfortable if you ask me. But I think with AIChE, I saw the opposite effect. I saw everyone wants structure, and that's great. And in some regards, that's really helpful. With the one area that I think you can very easily overstructure, it's going to be the mentorship, because you have different inputs every year. You have different people.
Yes, but I think we can both agree that no structure is not an engineering mindset. We like boundary conditions.
Yes, we like boundary conditions. We definitely enjoy our boundary conditions, but I think it has to be understood that these boundary conditions may shift from year to year.
Yes, so some if-then statements for things that could change can be put in. And we can at least start with the basics of, like, even having a basic line. This is how you can treat fellow mentees. This is how we can welcome them. This is how we can bridge the gap on some of the problems they're having in academia. Maybe some doubts they have with going through lower div. Those kind of things could be talked about.
Yeah.
And speaking of doubts, what kind of doubts did you have going through university?
That's a really good question. I think I came in to my freshman year super cocky. Like, I will admit 100%, I got a really, really good reality check my freshman year. And, you know, I failed math and I failed calculus too. I failed, whatever the second B.
21B.
21B. That's what I failed. I failed 21B, had to retake it over the summer. And that was a huge reality check for me, because I came in thinking I was the best thing that ever walked this earth sometimes. And I was like, nope, you need to realize that you need to study just as hard as everyone else. Like, this is going to be quite the playing field. And I think once I went through that, all of a sudden my self-confidence took a major hit. And I think it was a good thing. I think I grew a lot from that. I realized, like, failure is not the end of the story. Failure is part of the process. And I think, unfortunately, our academic system does not encourage you to fail fast. One of the huge, like, catchphrases of the startup world is this idea of fail fast. You want to fail fast because you want to learn what doesn't work and you want to move on quickly. You don't want to spin your wheels forever in one spot and never move. That's a lot of wasted energy, right? So one thing that I walked into kind of college with was this idea that I was super great. Got that slapped out of me real quick, and then learned to be okay with failure. And so, but one of my doubts that creeped in during that time was, am I good enough to even get through this? Because I wasn't getting the same grades in college that I did in high school. And that was a little scary. That was something that I was not used to. I was not used to kind of get my academics checked and not understanding everything on the first pass. And then I look back on it now, and, you know, they say, retrospectively, it's like 20/20 vision, right? So I look back on it and I'm like, no wonder I didn't understand everything on the first pass in college. I didn't spend the same amount of time on my academics in college that I did in high school. In high school, I would come home from 8 hours of school and do 6 hours of homework for 3 classes. So I was spending 2 hours a day on each class doing, you know, homework and studying and doing problems. So no, I wasn't ever understanding anything on the first try. I had enough practice to where it clicked finally. And once I understood that, kind of at the end of my junior year, I was like, oh, I can do this. And a lot of that came from AIChE. A lot of that support came from having, you know, students who came together and were like, we're all struggling in this class, so we're all going to do problems. Like, we're going to sit in the library and do problems, and someone understands one of the problems and can at least walk you through that one problem. And then you start teaching each other. And that's the way my class worked. And that was so helpful. Like, I still am in contact with like Nick and Tyson and Jen, all of who were people that we sat together in the library for hours going through homework assignments. I remember I was the one that did all the MATLAB. Like, my brain understood MATLAB like no other, and that was my strong suit. So I would help everyone with MATLAB, and in return, I got help on everything from fluid mechanics to heat transfer to mass transfer to thermo, because my head didn't wrap itself around the abstract as easily. So it was a great kind of exchange. Definitely junior year was a lot of doubts. I had a lot of doubts about my ability to get through. Sophomore year had not been kind to me. I also kind of battled this whole, like, I want a college experience, want to party all the time, but I'm a chemie student and don't have the time to party. So there was a lot of learnings and kind of learning to balance everything and enjoy the process. In terms of doubts, I definitely wondered if I was going to make it through the program, especially at the end of sophomore come junior year. And I think AIC was a huge support system in making sure I was able to get over that hump mentally.
I would say the same when it came to AIChE. They were the fundamental backbone to getting through what I needed to get through. And I noticed that in sophomore year, when I just started using a little bit of my own resources with them, just a little. I wasn't fully in, but I was halfway in. And just from that, and upping my commitment level, already was taking me in a different direction than freshman year. And I was going, why didn't I do this earlier?
Yes, I told myself the same thing. After junior year and everything that I was able to kind of accomplish because of the support system that I had with AIChE, I was like, wow, my freshman and sophomore years would have been significantly easier if I had had that type of support system. And I think, and a lot, some of it was my own cockiness at the time, and I think that was quickly knocked out of me. I think you realize how much stronger you are as a team, always. And I think that is one thing that's rather unique, I think, about the UC Davis program in general and the AIChE program at Davis, is the camaraderie there and the teamwork there. Like, everyone is there to help. And you find your clique and you find your support system and you make your kind of little safety net. And, you know, like, you find great people in that safety net, and it's so helpful. It definitely made my experience a lot better my senior year.
Yeah, especially for me, I would say it's senior year, that's when you finally got to reap a lot of the rewards of it. And for me, when it came to the mentorship family and being able to pour back in, I'm still talking to some of you all today, and hence this podcast. And it's been so fun to break the proximity barrier, and people have been very supportive of it. Like, I just got I just got a message from Rose about how she might want to do it, and then I got messages from a couple other folk that might want to do it from the mentorship family, and I'm just amazed that people really just got busy and they just wanted the right opportunity at the right time to meet up. So that's been really cool to watch all these dormant friendships, and you find out that they're still alive. And it's been really uplifting for me to see that all that work back when I was in my early 20s was absolutely for real. And it is probably going to last a lot longer than I thought. And I hope I can keep doing stuff like this from time to time, because it's been so uplifting to see these people you've really spent a lot of time with. And that there was a high density of time you spent with people, because they were really looking out for you and you were looking out for them. Even when you were absolutely exhausted, there was this real sense of camaraderie. And I still have friends from 2014 that we all went to Schlumberger at one point, and we still have a group chat, and that chat's still active even after like 5 years, because when something comes up, people want to announce it, and that's actually turned into a broadcasting method for these people.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where it's those are the strongest bonds, right? The ones that even after some time, you go back to those relationships and you're like, oh my God, like we can pick up right where we left off. And you're not the same people you were 5 years ago, but it doesn't negatively impact that friendship, right? You just pick up from where you left off, you catch each other up, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, cool. Like I have so many things that we could, still mutually help each other out with, even if it's just that it's like a bounce board for something, right? It's random ideas that you want to kind of run through other people, excuse me, that aren't necessarily in your close-knit group right then and there. It can be super helpful. So yeah, it's definitely kind of impressive how strong those bonds can be.
And I would say, with that being said, how did you use your mentorship experience and AIChE experience now in your current role, now that you're working in the Bay Area?
Excuse me.
Excuse.
Yeah, I don't know. We have the fires are burning in Sonoma, and the smoke is not fun to deal with. But in terms of my mentorship experience with AIChE, I think a lot of it has been taking the skill sets that being in that mentorship program gave me and really applying them to my professional mentorship kind of network that I now have to start building. I think for me, because a lot of my mentees in dance were engineers, but not within chemical, those necessarily haven't directly correlated to like job offers or anything like that. But people I knew through the mentorship program, not necessarily direct mentees, mentors, but people I knew through the mentorship program definitely helped me get to where I am now. And so it was one of those really cool things where having those relationships, people vouch for you and people help you get in the door. And that's huge. And that only comes because they know and trust each other's relationships, right? So, I was not super, super close to Nadia the whole time, but she knew of me and she knew me through Brian. And so through that, she was able to help me kind of know who to talk to when it came to Zymergen. So it was a great opportunity, and I've been there for the last year and a half now. So it definitely has paid off tenfold to have been part of that program in some way, shape, or form. And I think for me, a lot of it has been the skill sets that I took from that and the relationships that I built, and not even directly, like I said, not strictly my mentee mentor relationships, because I wasn't part of that program as formally as I think some other people were. But I think the skill sets that I built and the network that I built being kind of on the backside of that was really important.
Wow. So it's like your life trajectory was completely like, do you think it would have been, what do you even think it would have been like without AIChE?
That's a good question. I think it would have been a lot harder to get to a similar position because I only knew of Zymergen because of Nadia. I knew that that's where she worked. I knew she really enjoyed it. Nadia and I are similar enough to where I was like, if Nadia likes it, I'm pretty confident I will like it too. And having been at J&J and OSI Soft, I had realized that for me, the company culture at the place that I worked was going to be significantly important. It was going to make or break my enjoyment of kind of my work there. So I was like, okay, I am going to, lean on my network and really get to know people and see what their experience has been looking for jobs. And if I didn't have that experience to lean on and to learn from, definitely don't think I would have had as enjoyable of an experience postgraduate as I have had, because I think a lot of people don't know what to look for and don't know how to get the information that would really help you make an educated decision about where you want to go to work.
I would say the same thing. Like the career fair was really my only way to get some kind of actual contact with the real company, the real company that's right in your face. And like on Indeed or like these other online areas, it's so hard to grab onto something that's, that job's not actually active right now. And you don't know what you're grabbing half the time. And in the case of the career fair, at least, they're representing their company at the baseline. They may have positions, they may not, but you can actively ask the representative and see who and what they're looking for from a person, as opposed to just, here's a website, which is rather anti-human, because you don't know what you're pulling.
You don't know what you're pulling. And I think even with the reviews and the things like Glassdoor and stuff, those aren't people who whose opinion you trust, who how to weigh their opinion, right? Because everyone has, I think, a little bit of an unconscious bias, but your friends, how they behave, what they like and what they don't like. So to hear their opinions about something, how to filter that and how to kind of put it into your own perspective and say, okay, this person liked this and they enjoy A, but I don't. So that's probably not something I'm going to enjoy about that particular company. And getting that understanding, you don't do that. You can't do that through Glass. You can only really do that through human interaction and getting to know people and understanding that person and where their opinion comes from and why.
So with that being said, it's absolutely important to keep going to like career fairs and finding out networks that are going to be external to UC Davis. And so there actually are some now. I mean, I know the ICC is still active in trying to get a lot more bonding with people in the industry world so they can kind of fish for seeing what's out there. So when people are applying for jobs I think they're doing Handshake now instead of Aggie Job Link.
Yeah.
Now there can be a higher level of overlap of here's our jobs that people actually want in an entry level position, and for our need to get people out there into the workforce, which is, I'm glad they're using something that's a little more broad. So in the case of universities, Handshake is apparently more common. It's not like it's just specific to a UC Davis site. So that's been an interesting tidbit of information that I just heard about after being at the career fair a few days ago for UC Davis. So I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty neat. Now that you've got this broader network, maybe you can have a higher level of figuring out what's going on in California, because a lot of people just think Johnson & Johnson in Vacaville, P&G in Sacramento, and then maybe a couple startups, going on in the Bay Area, Genentech, and then they're kind of out of ideas after, like the unthinkable Chevron, because Chevron's really high up there, so they're like, probably not.
And I think it's a very different reality to go to PG, to go to Chevron versus going to Phillips versus going to J&J versus going to Genentech, right? They're very different industries. They definitely have some similarities depending on which two you compare, but very, very different for the most part from each other. And not everyone has the opportunities to do an internship in all of them, to figure out what you like and don't like, right? So it's a blend of doing your own internships versus listening to those who did an internship at other places and looking at like, okay, these are the things I like, these are the things I don't like, and then taking that and talking to your network literally and being like, hey, like, do you know of any positions that are like this? Because the reality is you don't know what's out there. Like you physically don't. And so that's where your network, both within AIChE and beyond that, and what your AIChE network lets you kind of interact with, comes in handy, comes in clutch.
Yeah, comes in clutch. Yes. So in the case of all that, and I had to do the same thing. I didn't even have like a legit internship before I got into the workforce. I did work part-time as an assistant mechanic for, a summer, part of a summer. But AIChE, mentorship and ChemiCar and getting involved as senior rep, I was really banking on having that experience be enough. And I'm finding out real quickly that if I was even in your class, I would have noticed the fire under my butt even more, which is ever increasing, which is kind of a concern because let's say some people don't have the opportunity to get into an internship beforehand. That may put them at a serious disadvantage into actually staying in California if they wanted to work or whatnot. So that was something I was noticing really quick, even when I was in school, but even more so 4 years later.
Yeah, I think it gets tougher and tougher every year. It really does. And I think the reality is that what was an internship level 10 years ago is now kind of your entry level in some ways. And at the same time, it's nowhere near your entry level. So you don't get as much bang for your buck now walking out of college. Like your college degree in and of itself does not open as many doors as it did, 10 years ago. But internships are harder and harder to come by because not every company has the ability to give you an internship, right? But I think a lot of that is kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like there are major disadvantages if you don't have it now, but I think that there are, like, you can get very creative in how you market yourself and what skills you pick up. And I think what a lot of people are missing right now is not the number of internships on your resume. I think the shift is from getting a certain number of internships or certain internships in general to can you prove that you have a list of soft skills that employers are looking for. And I think that plays into the benefit of many students because now you don't need an internship to prove that. If you can prove on your resume that you have the ability to talk to people, that you have the ability to be a team player, that you can solve problems, then that's as good as having an internship from some company. Now, do I still think the internship it gives you a leg up? I think yes, because an internship is a proven demonstration of those factors. It's a lot harder to prove them without the internship, but you still can because everyone does it to get the first internship anyway. Because, you need something to kind of get you in the door in the first place to get an internship. So the startup is the hardest part, like getting in that mindset, being able to structure your resume where it sells that to your first internship. That's the hardest part. If you get your first internship and your first job, you've basically gotten over the largest kind of activation energy section. And then after that, it becomes easier and easier because you can rely more heavily on those experiences and people kind of give you a lot more credit for the experiences that you've had in your past rather than you're trying to sell them that you.
Yeah, with that being said, it's really funny you mentioned activation energy because Carlos on a stream last week, no joke, said the same thing. Same analogy, same everything. It was just like, yeah, it's going to be easier, but you have to get over the hill first. And it's like, oh, man, you're talking about reaction potential. And it's like, oh, this is so funny. I mean, we're cut from a similar cloth. So, I mean, we shouldn't be too surprised, but I still get a crack out of it.
Yeah, I think we definitely are from very things where when you've been drilled about these kind of physical phenomena, you see them in your everyday life. Like you legitimately see these types of phenomena play out in life in ways you never thought, but the patterns are the same. So
it's a good model.
Yeah, that's the basis of a good model, right? So yeah, it definitely, activation energy is really important. Getting over that. Once you get over that, it becomes significantly easier. And I think most students struggle with that right now, and I think it's the hardest part. And a lot of the default is to get an internship, and a good handful of students do. And I think it's still the best way to prove your skills, but it's definitely not the only way to prove your skills.
Yeah, with that being said, what would you say to the people who want to get involved with mentorship, but they're still kind of on the fence about it?
I think I'm always on the side of encouragement, and try it before you knock it. I think you would be surprised at how much you can benefit, regardless of how much of an active role you take into it. But I think I will always caveat with you get as much as you get out of it what you put into it. So the energy and the time and the respect that you put into the program is the time, the energy, and the respect you're going to get out of it. So if you take the time to get to know people, if you take the time to really connect with people, that's going to pay out for you later. If you are just there as a body in a room for an activity, that's not going to give you as much benefits. Like, you might get the extra help on that problem that you needed, but it's not going to go much further than the direct help you're seeking. And so I think it's one of those things where I'm always encouraging people to try it, but to truly try it, to truly give it a solid 100%, and kind of have an idea of what you're looking for, right? Because I think there's different types of mentorships. There's some students who really just need the academic mentorship and aren't as interested in all of the support for jobs for whatever reason. Maybe they don't want to they want to go into academia, and so they really want the support to be like, okay, I really want to do well in all my classes to set myself up for success to go to grad school. Great. That's going to require a very different mentor than someone who wants to go into industry, who needs to know how to tailor their resume for a job interview or how to sell themselves at a career fair. Those are similar but different outcomes, right? So knowing what you want to get out of the mentorship program and giving it a solid try, I think are my two pieces of advice to anyone on the fence, because I'm like, you're going to get something out of it, but the level of success is going to depend on whether you know what you out of it and you put the time in to get that out.
I'm glad you said that about trying to get people off the fence, because a lot of people just kind of want to stand there and just, oh, I'm in mentorship. It's like, wait, mentorship's more of an active thing. So it's not just standing there and kind of watching, a guy on a presentation or watching something that's coming about. It's like, no, it's more of an active role. So if you're a mentee, there's this active sense of, I want to know more information, so I'm going to go after the information and the people who are doing correctly. And then the mentor is the flip side, saying, I want to reach out and help in ways that people did not help me, or I did get help and I want to continue to pass the torch. Either way, it can be a very strong motivator to reach out. And then when both parties reach out, now you're really seeing the benefits of mentorship versus one side trying and the other side just flopping. Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things where you get out of it what you put into it, and the more you put in, it almost becomes an exponential. So it's a very interesting, it starts off a little bit linear, and at those lower values, you definitely have a more linear relationship. And then there's a critical turning point in which it becomes exponential, and what you put in gets you significantly more out. And it's not necessarily tangible, right? It's not necessarily people sitting down and giving you resume help anymore. At that point, it could be like conversations 2 years down the line where you're mentioning like, yeah, I'm not really loving my job, I'm on the lookout for something else, and someone says, hey, I have a friend who's looking for people and I think you'd be a great fit. You know what I mean? And that's a very different output than what you put in 10 years ago for that first intern, you know what I mean, for those first funds of the mentorship program. But you don't get to get there by just staying in the linear form the whole time. Like, no joke. If you stay in that linear regime, it's going to take you significantly longer to see that same output. But if you put in the time, you switch into this exponential regime, and now all of a sudden you're getting a lot more out of it.
that happened already to several of my friends that are firsthand, with me that were at UC Davis. And no joke, when one of our friends was like, hey, I probably need to look for something else right now, we already got people going, okay, you need to check out AFC because we
Yeah.
could vouch for you, even though it was a few years ago. But we know that how much you've gotten better just from looking at what you did in your work over here. We've done it with a couple other folk just trying to get out of, like for me, just getting out of upstream oil. I had two friends that were at AFC that knew who I was, and I worked with them in undergrad. And that was pretty recent because I only stayed in oil for like 11 months. So that reaching out was just enough information that I needed to help with the interview process. And once I got through it, I was like, oh my goodness, that little bit of info was just the right amount of momentum to get me where I needed to go.
Yeah. 100% agreed. And it's one of those things where that's not something you could have predicted, 5 years ago. You wouldn't know whether you were going to love or hate oil. I think but that doesn't necessarily translate to, okay, after 11 months, I will be looking for a new job. Like you don't always get that type of information ahead of time. So I think it is really cool. It shows you kind of firsthand what the payoff can be for what you put in, right? So
exactly.
Cool.
Bonus question, Ines. So we're at the end of the actual questions list. I wanted to give you an opportunity if you had anything else to ask me or anything else you wanted to talk about before we stop the stream.
I think I'm curious from your side how much you feel like now that you and I have graduated and have been in the workforce, what do you think is the biggest thing we can give back to the mentees, either kind of directly or indirectly, kind of in that junior, senior level? How could we help them be better mentors?
What a great question, because this is something I want to do actively. So I think the first thing being, we need to give them the structure that they can't see while the chaos is going around in junior and senior year. That's something we can provide because we already went through it. So that time frame is fixed. So we can at least give the lessons learned from our own experiences. And if we compile enough of them, they can see in fixed time, oh, these mentees were too shy and they just needed someone to give them a hand. And then they decide not to do anything about it until like 9 months into the quarter. So like spring quarter is already here. Yeah. It's like, it's a little late to help these guys now. You've got mentors that are leaving. You got new mentors that are coming in. And you have a whole year of mentees that really were just kind of on the fence, just watching it happen versus being active. So that would be one method. The second method is giving them some Q&A. I mean, I give them the means to like go to an info session about one of our jobs, or just even give a window for them to ask about what it's like after leaving school. Because a lot of kids don't really get that. Like the industry info session that I normally got as an undergrad was, okay, I'm in the middle row and you got like 3 kids that are like absorbing a fair amount of the attention. And then everybody else is just kind of there in an audience setting. And we're all kind of wondering when the free pizza is going to come back. And it's not.
It was always about the free food. I do remember.
Well, that's how a lot of people get started. But especially if you can't engage, which is really what you're there for, we need to give them another window to do that. And I'm thinking, at least for this podcast, it's really small, but collecting a lot of the lessons learned could be done through what we're doing right now. So those are 2 ways that I can think of to help. And I think the third way is doing what we do at the career fairs. So you give a little bit of information on what's going on in the real world, and you can kind of show them a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. So people can go, oh, okay, there really is something out there. I just need to keep working for it, and everything I'm doing matters. So there's that that third level is an encouragement of don't give up on your lower div because you think it's hard. In fact, all the more, look at these lessons learned. people wasted their lower div because they thought it wasn't as valuable as their upper div. Common, super common. And then when people get in their junior and senior year, they go, what was I doing? It's like, well, one, you were probably trying to figure out what you were doing at the university to begin with, instead of just, I need to start making the incremental steps to being better today before it's too late. So that sense of urgency, I think, is really lost in lower div, just because you're dropped in a completely new environment, and you got to figure out who you are, and you got to figure out who your friends are again. So I think there is a level of, you need to spread out a little bit and kind of figure out how you're going to do it. So maybe a 6-month period to do that, but don't take 2 years to do it. You don't have that kind of time.
You don't have that amount of time. I think I love those 3 ideas. I think so. Like, there needs to be a way to keep telling the story, because I think there's a power to hearing everyone's story and how they differ, and how there's a lot of different ways to get somewhere. Like, all of us did something slightly different. We all had slightly different experiences in college, but I think I would say that most of us have been really successful. And one, success is very different for different people, and understanding that and kind of grasping that and defining what your own success means is going to be really important. And I think leaning into that and being like, okay, so here's how everyone else did it. And there's no one linear path. There really isn't. And kind of selling the mentors on that and being like, there's no one way to be a good mentor, but here's a bunch of different stories of people who had success with different ways of doing it, and giving them a little bit kind of what to allude to your structure point. I think giving them different opportunities and different ways to think about that structure, and how that can be really helpful, and how the small things can make the biggest impact on people later.
Well, with that being said, Ines, thank you for being on the podcast. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this one quite a bit.
This was great. I always love saying I love talking with you. It's great. It's awesome. But with that being said, we should actually meet up in person at some point and keep talking.
Can do.
I love the discourse chats, but we definitely, the in-person interaction is always good.
We'll talk about that in a little bit here. With that being said, everyone in the audience, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.